how you collaborate with people, problem solve, do some critical thinking and many other things. But I think Pramath defines leadership in a very different way. And he's always sort of, has the rule of three. I don't know if you've seen his knock knock video on the rule of three. Well, that's on communication. But generally in life, everything that Pramath sort of talks about is always in threes. So Pramath, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for taking this session. Will you tell us a little about how you came up with the leadership equation that you always talk about, and why are those three things that you talk about so important in leadership?
Seema, what I talk about is really born out of my own reflections and self-discovery. When I was in my 30s, I suddenly started being confronted with this question of how good a leader are you, and how good a potential leader can you be, and your future is going to depend on how good a leader you are. And when that started to hit home, that people are going to evaluate me on my leadership, I was like, what is this leadership thing that I'm going to be evaluated on? Because it's not like a test you can take and prove that you are a leader. So I started to think about, let me figure out what leadership is. And so I started reading and trying to educate myself. And as it turned out, the more I read and the more I tried to educate myself, I got more confused. And I couldn't figure out. There were just too many things you had to do as a leader. People said people write about this, people talk about it, and they say you have to be a visionary, you have to be strategic, you have to be inspiring, you have to make a difference, and so on and so forth. So I was getting very confused. How can one human being do all these things possibly? So then I said, okay, I have to simplify this for myself. So what are the 2-3 things that are really essential, and how can I focus on that? And so I started to ask myself, what are those things? And can I get to the core of what those things are? And that's what led me to coming up with these 3 dimensions of leadership. While I was doing this thinking, reflecting, learning, I also realized that actually there is no one leadership model. Each one of us has our own leadership style. And that leadership style is authentic to you as an individual. My leadership style will always be different from yours, Seema, and yours will always be different from mine. Trying to be like you or you trying to be like me is a little bit like we are 2 very different human beings. We'll never be the same. And so our leadership and our leadership style, the kind of impact we have as a leader on other people, is going to be very different. And so there is no one leadership style. And so each one is different. And therefore, you have to figure out your authentic style that is authentic to you, specific to you. But that means that everybody is a different leader. Yet, if you ask somebody, is Sachin Tendulkar a better leader or Mahendra Singh Dhoni a better leader? Is Manmohan Singh a leader? We take iconic names of people that everybody knows, then people immediately say, oh, yes, of course, or no, that person is not. Everybody says Dhoni is a leader, but if you ask people about Sachin, half the people in the room will say, well, not really. If you ask about Manmohan Singh, then people will caveat that and they'll say, oh, as a finance minister in 1991, definitely a leader. As a prime minister for 2 terms, no, probably not. Yes, no. So then you suddenly realize that people do make some judgments which are common about who they think a leader is. And so why do others judge people's leadership in a certain way? There must be some common benchmarks that they use. So it was a combination of seeing that, yes, there must be some common benchmarks, and realizing that, yes, these have to be authentic to you. How could that even be reconciled? How could that be even possible? And that's what led me to this sort of triad of leadership that I always talk about. And like you said, it has 3 elements, which we'll probably talk about later. That was the process that I went through.
No, but you need to do the big reveal. I think you've said there is a trial. So what are the 3 things that you think?
Yeah. So the 3 things are, that you have to, leadership has 3 parts: lead performance, lead people, and lead yourself. Of this, the lead performance bit is a necessary condition. Those of us who remember our mathematical theorems, without it, there is no leadership, which is the lead performance. But with only that, you can't be a leader. So the sufficient conditions, what is also needed, are the lead people mostly, and also to some extent the lead self. Now, what do I mean by these? Lead performance is very simple, that somewhere you have to deliver. Everybody expects you to create some distinctive, some meaningful output, result. They want you to exceed expectations. They want you to make a difference, leave an impact, leave your mark. Without that, you can be all things that you might want, make a list, but if you don't do that, you won't be seen to be a leader by people. And before I go into this triad, one of the things that I did realize is that you can't declare yourself to be a leader. So somewhere others judge whether you are a leader or not. For example, I mean, you can't say I'm beautiful. I mean, yeah, you can in a philosophical, figuratively way, but whether you believe it or not, whether you're beautiful or not, ultimately people decide whether you're beautiful or not, because they look at you and they use some benchmarks, whatever it is, right? You have sharp features, you're tall, you're fair, whatever. In India, we are obsessed about color, so on. But similarly, in leadership also, it's others who judge whether you're a leader or not. They can be pretty harsh. And one of the criteria they use to judge is your performance. Which is why, even though Sachin is such a wonderful cricketer, probably one of the greatest cricketers, the greatest cricketer of all time, people pass judgment and say, oh, Dhoni is a better leader. And the reason is that Dhoni won more matches for India. Dhoni won some of the critical tournaments, the World Club, the T20, the 50 overs.
So essentially,
matches overseas. Only he becomes.
So essentially what you're saying is, as far as performance was concerned, perhaps Dhoni had a better record, or performance as the world sees it, or performance, the measurable performance in the world of cricket, you'd probably find Dhoni doing a better job. And that's why he becomes a better leader in comparison.
Yes. And even if you see the Manmohan Singh example, the same person, the same individual is seen to be a leader as a finance minister, but not as a prime minister. Okay. Because as finance minister, he is seen to have made a big difference India was in the doldrums and liberalization happened. And so the big shift that happens in Indian economy is attributed to him. If you look at why I'm here, it's because ISB was successful. If I had built institutions or created institutions that weren't greatly successful, people wouldn't have respected me or seen me as a leader. Even in jobs, right? If you're given a task to do and you do a great job, you hit it out of the park, you exceed people's expectations. And this is a harsh way of looking at it, because sometimes you do work hard. Sometimes you are a good person. You may have all the intrinsic qualities, capabilities, skills. You may even have a track record from the past where you've actually performed. But if in that particular situation you don't perform, you don't deliver, then people don't attribute leadership qualities to you. So it's a tough world out there. And in the workplace, it's particularly true. So that has to be true. But what has also happened, Seema, is that over the last few decades, just delivering is not enough. People want you to be a good leader of people as well. You need to be able to inspire people. You need to be able to grow other people. You need to be able to command the respect of people. You need to be able to collaborate. People need to look up to you, which is where the lead people part comes in, right? So the lead performance and the lead people. And the final thing, which is around lead yourself, is if you are going to try to lead people, if you are going to influence them and inspire them and tell them to change or improve or grow, then you have to do it yourself, because you won't be able to coach them, inspire them, help them grow, because it's not something theoretical. You have to have made changes like that to yourself to first have the right to tell somebody else to change. If you can't change, who are you to tell others to change? But also, you'll only be effective if you've gone through that process of growth, so that you can actually give them authentic, real, practical advice and coaching and mentoring. So that brings you to the third part, which is the lead self.
So essentially, leadership is not just about leading other people, which is what most people assume it to be. It's a combination of making sure that your performance is good, that you are growing yourself, and that you're also inspiring and motivating and growing other people. And that's where leaders sort of, you come in from. Is that a fair summation?
Okay. Yeah, it is.
We have an interesting question right now from Amit. He wants to know, so leadership is what matters most in a profession. He's asking, is that how you should sort of look at it, because that's the most important thing?
Yeah, ultimately, in any work environment, at some point or the other, if you're ambitious and you want if you have aspirations to grow in your career, to do well, then your leadership capabilities, your leadership qualities will come under the lens of people at the workplace in your profession, and people will constantly evaluate you against that. Whether you are in a for-profit, whether you're in a non-profit, whether you are an entrepreneur, whether it's your own company, whether you're working somewhere, as you grow more senior, as you start managing people, even as a manager, people will evaluate you on your leadership qualities.
I'll pick this up again from here, the same place. There is someone called Vinayak who wants to know, what are the qualities that one should work on when you shift from an individual contributor's role to a leader's role?
Yeah, so there the big challenge, Vinayak, is that as an individual contributor, suppose you are delivering on performance, right? You're doing well. You are known to deliver results. You're known to exceed expectations. You are a guy who is easy to work with, collaborative. People like you, want to have you as part of the teams. And people generally say, oh, Vinayak is a growth-oriented guy. He's done a lot to improve himself. He's an example to others. So you have all those qualities. But the moment you move into a leader role, not only do you have to do that for yourself, you have to do that for the team and the people who are your followers or who are under your guidance, under your supervision. And so you now have to help them perform. And you have to therefore perform as a unit, not just your individual contribution, but you have to get performance out of your team. You have to get performance out of these people, which means that how do you motivate them? How do you incentivize them? How do you get them to overcome obstacles, challenges, right? You can't just leave it to themselves. On the dimension of leading others, you have to make sure that you are adding value to them, that they feel like you are teaching them, mentoring them, coaching them, inspiring them, that they're learning something from you, that you are enabling them, that they feel like working under you, they're growing and becoming better. And finally, on the lead self part, you have to start now working on those skills that have to do with inspiring other people, which you never had to do before. You really focused on those skills that may have to do with your own individual performance, like being able to communicate or being able to think better. Now the question is, how do you grow those skills that will help others do that? How will you make leaders out of others? And so that means making changes to yourself, becoming much more of a leader in yourself. And so how do you do that? So I think those are the changes that you need to make, the qualities that you need to work on using your language on all three dimensions.
And especially the last one, right? Because I think as individual contributors, you often are focused on your own performance and your own sort of, this thing, but your own sort of, maybe growing yourself. But now you have to grow yourself in tandem with growing others. And I think that becomes a very, very different way for an individual contributor to start thinking. And it's not easy, right?
Yeah, it's not easy. And in fact, most people, the key challenge in that situation is the leading self part, because you have to grow and change yourself to become a leader of others, manager of others, and not just be an individual contributor. To be able to get others to perform, to be able to inspire others and gain their respect, you have to change yourself. You have to grow yourself. You have to find other muscles to exercise. And often you have to learn on the job, and sometimes you also screw up and grow through that process. So yeah, being able to lead self in that transition becomes the biggest challenge. And many people are not able to do that because they have they're just not able to make the transition, or not on all dimensions.
Amit, I think, has a follow-up question. Again, says, what are the key skills that one needs to have to become a leader? I hope we've answered your question, Amit. If you need more clarity, we're happy to sort of relook at that. Amit?
I may take a minute.
Sure.
I think there is some merit in saying, yeah, these are the three broad areas. But the skills now become there are some generic skills, but there are skills that become authentic to you, right? So for example, in leading performance, you may want to drive performance by being very focused on numbers, for example. I may like to drive performance by saying, hey, I'll just do such high quality work, numbers will come. Now, there's a very different leadership style to drive performance. Sometimes I used to be told that I was not a great problem solver. So I would always have this insecurity in me that, there's a very tough challenge. Will I be able to solve it? But then I would solve for that by actually getting great problem solvers on my team who may have been smarter than me, greater problem solvers than me, and solve the problem that way than trying to be a great problem solver myself. Amit or you might do it differently. So which skills you need to drive performance is really up to you. There's a whole host of skills. For me, for example, getting the right problem defined is a very big part of driving performance. I spend a lot of time saying, what are we really trying to solve for? Why are we doing it? There are other leaders who will just jump right into it. They'll do 50 different things, and over time, they'll zero in on what the one thing is that needs to be done. And they're quite comfortable doing it that way. I'm not. So the others are probably developing the skill of zeroing in on a problem by trying things out. I'm probably zeroing in on a problem by sitting back and saying, what is the problem? Let me first understand it before I try something out. So these are the broad areas. Now, how within those areas you lead performance, lead people, lead yourself is really up to you. And there is a whole host of possible recipes for each of these dishes, right? You can choose which one you want to follow.
We have another question here, which is from, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is an interesting question from Nitin, and I will go back to Amit's question, but I just wanted to say, Nitin has a question which says, how difficult is it for an introvert to lead an organization? By the way, even before Pramath starts answering that, let me tell you, he always says he's an introvert. And what are the ways they can overcome this in order to be able to communicate effectively with teams? How difficult is it for an introvert to lead? And what are the ways they can overcome to be able to communicate?
Yeah, I don't think it is difficult for introverts to lead at all. I would even argue that introverts make better leaders, but I don't want to debate that with the extroverts. In fact, there's a book about this was a book written about this by someone also, and Dipanita, who's on the call with us, can probably dig it out. It's a book about introverts and how introverts. Let's see. I think on the basic problem, the basic assumption that we make is that introverts don't communicate or cannot engage with people. And it is true that if you're introverted, it does take a lot of energy. You'd rather just sit there in a meeting, or you'd let others do the talking while you're just listening and you're happy to take notes and so on. Obviously, if you become so introverted, then it's not easy to be making a difference and doing some of the things that I'm talking about. But you can overcome it when you realize that, you don't have to change yourself. If you see leadership as a part of the task that you have to do, or what the work you have to do, it's like writing or thinking, then you see it as a task. And so, for example, to give you a simple idea, when I was first told to speak up more in meetings, and I knew that I was not doing that, and I was not comfortable doing that because I was shy, I was introverted, and I had some insecurity that, if I say something, it'll come out wrong, it'll be stupid, will I be intervening at the right time, and so on. I started small. I realized by observing people that one of the ways to participate in meetings is to ask simple questions. A question like, Seema, what you just said, I didn't quite understand what you were saying. Could you take a minute? I'm sorry to interrupt everyone, but can you just explain that to me? Or, you just said this, did you mean it this way or that way? Just asking questions. Now, I'm not saying that was easy in itself. Even getting the courage to intervene and interrupt or ask somebody questions was very tough. But once I did something small like that, then I realized that, I can do this. And in fact, people would come to me after the meeting and say, that was a great question you asked. And I would say, really? I was just trying to sound intelligent or contribute because I was told to. And then I realized that actually you can use your introvertedness to listen better in meetings, not be anxious to talk, and observe people very carefully and ask the tough questions or the right questions at the right time, bide your time. You know how some people are, they talk so much that they don't even know what they're talking about. They're confusing everybody. So you cut through the clutter. So I then started using my introvertedness to my advantage to say, hey, I don't have to speak. That's not my natural tendency anyway. I'm happy to listen, but I'll find the right opportunity, the right arguments where other people are not explaining things well or they are confusing others. That's when I will intervene and use my ability to question and contribute. So I think you start small, but you don't change yourself. You use your introvertedness as almost a strength to listen better, to observe better, to learn by seeing what is going on. And over time, I think this has become better. I still think I'm very introverted. I have to go to a dinner this evening with the whole Ashoka University team. I'm at an offsite and I'm dreading it. I would just rather lie in my room and read a book or watch something on Netflix, but I'll have to do it. And I know once I'm there, I'll be okay, but I have to overcome this resistance to even getting out of my room.
Or you'd much rather talk to everybody on Zoom and tell them all about what you think leadership is. Okay. We have a question from Shailesh Garg. Shailesh is joining us in the third cohort. And of course, Shailesh, lots and lots of questions when you are with us starting next week. But Shailesh wants to know, how do you share feedback to people on traits and skills in which you are not great, but that specific trait is very important for that person's growth? I may not be very good at it, but I think that person needs to develop that skill so that they become better. How do you make this feedback authentic from a leader's perspective, even if you don't excel yourself in that skill? I think that's a very, very interesting question.
Yeah, it is a very interesting question. Well, the only way to be authentic is to admit that you're not good at it. So I think that's an easy part. But sometimes I'm trying to think of examples like that, and I can't think of too many because you do tend to advise people on things that you know how to do well. In areas where I know that somebody has to improve, that I'm trying to improve and I'm also struggling, I ask people to go take advice from someone else. I know, for example, that I have a tough time saying no. And that often gets me into trouble. So but I do recognize that it's a problem with me. And I do want to advise some other people that, you should become better at saying no. Don't say yes to everything. And then I will probably say, listen, I'm not the right guy to tell you how to do it because I'm the worst example of somebody who should be able to say no. But maybe you can go talk to Seema because, she is somebody who I know is very much more judicious about being able to say yes versus no. And maybe she can tell you how she does it. I think she's very good at it. So that's how I would provide some advice, refer them to something else, someone else, even while admitting that I'm still struggling with it. I could even say that, hey, I sometimes am able to do it if I put some, I know that in some cases I just put some guardrails and I say, there's a rule I will not break. And that's the only way I cannot not say yes all the time. And I would share that with them, but still say, listen, it doesn't solve for everything. It solves for a little bit. This is my small effort. But if you really want to do it right, go talk to Seema or go talk to somebody who you think does it well. That's how I would do it. But I would admit that I don't know the answer, obviously. And there's no point in giving people theoretical answers, to your point about being authentic. Maybe you can point them to a book like the one I just did, which is almost like pointing to someone else, to the written word rather than a human being.
Okay. This is an interesting one. I think it's coming from the fact that you said sometimes just asking a question be your way of solution. Here, someone is asking, people laugh when I ask question. It reinforces the belief that I'm inadequate. How do I stop feeling like this?
Well, I think there, my suggestion would be that if there are situations where there are people who have also been witness to you asking a question and somebody or people in the room laughing, I think you need to sit down with those folks and ask them why they laughed or what was it about your question that made them laugh. Until you get the feedback, you won't know what you're doing wrong. Ask a friend who's in the room who is a well-wisher and respects you, or you respect them, and see what they have to say. And if you're still willing to subject yourself to being a little bit of a guinea pig for yourself, then ask somebody who you trust to join a meeting and then ask a question and see if it still happens. And that person you trust should then come back. So bring in a well-wisher and an observer into the session so that you can actually, if it's on Zoom, then you can at least, if you have a recording, show the recording to somebody else and say, listen, this is what happened. This was happening. I asked this question. Looks, people started laughing. What do you think happened here? Either you are reading too much into it and they're not laughing at you so much, or they're just amused by the question, but the question was still a valid one. Or sometimes people laugh because a question may not come out right, or it may not be relevant, but you'll only be able to judge that when a third party is able to look at that situation and see what happened and give you some insights. So that's what I can think of.
So we have a question again from Amit, and he wants to know, how did you come up with the idea of setting up HSoL, the Harappa School of Leadership? And I'm going to ask you after that, Pramath, why was the leadership curriculum so important for us in HSoL? What is it about that makes it a differentiating factor in the accelerated management program? But first, Amit's question and then mine.
Yeah, I think the HSoL is a natural progression of what I've been trying to do at Harappa, where the idea was that more and more people are going to learn online. And this is not just because it's a fad. I fundamentally believe that as the printed book changed the way people learned and education became much more widely accessible, online education is also going to change the way, and is already changing the way people learn and get educated. And it's a fundamental shift. I wanted to learn how people will learn online, what will be most effective, not just replicate what happens in the classroom online, but really try to see this as a new way of education. And so we started, Seema, as you know, by designing those content courses at Harappa. I do want to take these learnings to a point where we can start offering longer courses and maybe substitute some of the degree programs and some of the capabilities that people come to learn in brick and mortar universities. So the HSoL is the natural progression of that, is to say, okay, now I know how I can create courses. Now I know how people learn, what people, and of course, that's not that I've finished learning, that journey will continue, but we felt ready to now take on more subject level courses rather than just individual skill courses, which is what Harappa normally does. And that therefore at the School of Leadership, basically do leadership development programs, but tied to particular topics and areas. Management and business is an intuitive, easy one for me because I've set up a business school. And also, interestingly, my own personal journey was that I was a researcher and an academic, and then moved into the world of business. And I went through a very smart 1-month boot camp and was thrown off the deep end to start working with people who were MBAs and had a lot of business background. And I didn't do so badly. I don't think you need to be a wizard or a highly smart person to figure this out. And I felt like, hey, if we can do the equivalent of a abbreviated short program that prepares you for the world of management, while still building in the leadership skills, which I will come to in a minute, which was your question, then why not? Let's give it a shot. And so that's how the AMP, HSoL was born, the AMP was born. And here the real reason for the leadership part of the curriculum, Seema, is that I've always believed that the content of technical, functional stuff, professional stuff can always be learned on your own, and you can learn it from multiple sources. But nobody really teaches you to think deliberately about leadership. And that's what helps you succeed at the workplace. It's those skills that made Dhoni a better captain than Sachin Tendulkar. It's the same skills that made Manmohan Singh be a better minister than a prime minister. And so the unique thing about AMP is that we teach you those skills that truly make you successful at work, beyond just having the technical skills, which you can get from other places also. So that's what makes AMP distinctive, is the leadership part of our curriculum and the Thrive skills, the Harappa skills that we teach.
Interestingly, Pramath, there was a candidate or a prospective learner that I was speaking with today, and I think one of the asks that the gentleman had was, young boy, actually, he was like, I want to, I've never been mentored or taught leadership in my this thing, and he wanted to understand exactly what leadership means. We've already spoken about it, but why is it that we don't actually teach these skills in MBA, we don't teach. I've not seen MBA curriculum actually teaching leadership the way we do it, right? They teach it on a different organizational leadership or other things like that, but it never sort of comes out in this way, does it?
No, it doesn't. Somehow people assume that it can't be taught, or they feel that, well, one, people think it can't be taught, it can't be learned. And even if it can be, then you have to do it by just going through the hard knocks in life. You learn it in a experiential way, as a learning by doing rather than learning by being taught. And that is what I have always challenged. I feel that if I had been informed of, yes, learning by doing is important, but it's also important to have some framework, some concepts, some idea of what you are going to learn by doing, rather than just discovering it. And you can therefore start building on your skill set at an early stage. It's not like you're going to do a program like this or any other program and pop out and become suddenly a different, changed person. But you can start through these programs, you start on that journey of leadership. And the sooner you do these types of programs, the earlier you can start, the more seasoned leader you will become over time, because there's a lifelong journey. It also becomes difficult to change yourself. You develop habits, and you particularly develop some bad habits that don't make you a good leader, and it becomes tough to change those as you go forward. If you realize very late in life that, oh, this is a limiting thing. So if you were able to do the intervention early enough, then you can realize that, hey, yeah, I'm introverted, but that doesn't stop me from making contributions or speaking up and still retaining my introvertedness. So that's the only thing here, that the sooner you inform people, the sooner people can at least know that this is what's going to happen, or this is what people are going to look for in your capabilities over time. Then you can start making an attempt to proactively work on it rather than let it happen to you, depending on what experiences you have. You're on mute.
I have two more questions here. I'll go with Bipin's question first and then come back to Vinayak. Bipin says, kindly guide me on how to work in the present environment where everyone is leading and managing their respective position at the same time. How do you make your work meaningful to the organization? Um, if I'm reading this correctly, I think Bipin probably wants to know how do you become more meaningful in your work so that at some point you also get to lead. Uh, and right now, I think in his organization, he believes everyone's leading and everyone's doing the thing. So how does he get that shot at,
How to make one's work meaningful to the organization? Okay, I'm not sure I have the full context, but if I just take the last part of what you've written, Bipin, then I think the way you make your work well, firstly, organizations want you to deliver. So whatever work you've been given, task you've been given, whatever expectations they have for you, just make sure that you deliver those. That will make it meaningful. At the end of the day, the business hires you, an institution hires you and pays you for your output. Once you have done that, then you have what I call earned the right to ask for more, greater responsibility, greater role, more areas and opportunities to make a difference in. So, and then again, you take on a larger responsibility, larger role, and you make your work meaningful. So I think ultimately it is about leading performance, and it is also about leading people. If people in the organization see you add value to other people, if other employees in the organization say, I want to work with Bipin, then I think you are being meaningful to the organization. So let others do what they are doing. Don't worry about it. You earn yourself the reward and the right to do bigger and greater things by just delivering, performing, leaving your mark, doing things in a way that is very different from other people, exceeding expectations, surprising people. That's how you'll make your work meaningful. Solving real problems, not just being focused on your activity and the fact that you're working hard, but also on delivering and being much more outcomes driven. That's how you'll make your work meaningful.
We'll go to Vinayak's question. He's asking, leading self is a big challenge. As in, for the other two, leading performance and leading a team, there's a definite goal. You can sort of, others see it, you see it. But leading self, there seems to be no sort of defined way of measuring it. So how do you deal with that, Pat?
Sorry.
Leading self is a big challenge. But because in the other two, which is leading performance and leading team, you have definitive goals or you have ways to measure them. How do you sort of lead self? How do you figure out that you're doing the right thing?
Lead self is all about getting feedback. The only way you'll know that you're leading self, you'll see your own progress, firstly. But ultimately, either proactively or automatically, you will start getting feedback. People will say, wow, Pramath, that was a great meeting. You asked some great questions in that meeting. And you'll know, wow, I've been able to overcome my introvertedness to ask questions. People will compliment you on your writing. People will compliment you on the output, the results. So it's only through virtue of feedback that you will be able to see, it's through the feedback that you also see what are the things you need to fix. What are the areas that you need to improve? Some of those improvement areas you'll be able to do on your own because you kind of have a sense of what you need to do, how you need to do it. Some areas you'll be clueless, in which case you'll have to get help from others. And that's why I've always talked about the importance of having a mentor in one's life. And if not a mentor, to at least get a coach. Don't have to formally get a coach or get somebody to pay you, but have somebody who you can go to for advice and say, how should I do this? Do you have any examples, analogies? Can you tell me what I need to do differently? Can you observe me and tell me? And that coach could be a peer, it could be a person on your team, it could be a supervisor, it could be your spouse, it could be anyone. So that's how I would think about leading self.
Okay, I think we'll come back to this question from Amit, and he wants to know what are the subjects that are taught in AMP. We can definitely have someone speak to you, but Pramath, if you want to mention why we chose what we chose for AMP.
Yeah, so we quickly can, sorry.
And also he wants to know why it's online. I did answer part of that, but largely I think it's because it allows people from very many different parts of the country also to join in who may not be able to come to the campus. Also for working professionals, right? You may not be able to take time off to come to a campus or to this thing. So I think the course was online largely for that reason as well. Pramath, anything else you want to add here?
No, on the subjects, I can quickly say that we cover the basic core subjects in any management program, which is accounting, finance, marketing, strategy, operations, HR, leadership, of course. But then what we did was we added 3 topics which are very relevant in today's workplace: digital marketing, product management, data science. And then, of course, we added the whole Harappa leadership curriculum that we've been talking about today, which I think is the truly the power skill, the superpower, if you will, of a program like this, or people's, your own effectiveness at work. So that's the curriculum broadly, which is very different from a typical MBA or typical management program.
Okay, so Pramath, there is a question here, but I've been asked not to ask you because but I'll ask you in any case. It's interesting because I think people do want to know, how do you measure soft skills, which are soft skills or leadership skills, which are so crucial in management? I mean, the second part is, I think, more related to you, but generally, I think even it's interesting to know, how do you measure that someone is doing well on leadership skills?
Well, you can only, listen, you can measure, there are all kinds of assessments and so on you can do, as you know, Seema, we do some of that in our work at Harappa. But ultimately, the measure is when people you work with say, wow, your communication skills have improved, your problem solving skills have improved, you seem to be more creative now than I knew you before, or you're so much more confident, or you are so much more articulate, or you're doing so well with the clients, you're able to deal with difficult situations better. So it's really, I think the feedback aspect in any leadership discussion is extremely important. It's extremely crucial. Some things you will know yourself, something you can know through doing some assessments or tests, but the biggest impact comes from third party or outside people observing, which is why I started this whole talk by saying you can't decide whether you're a leader. Other people decide whether you're a leader. And that's really because of that reason. Nobody can really judge or assess. It's to be seen and experienced.
So here is a question for someone who has been a UPSC aspirant for 6 years. Now they want to move into a field where they can utilize their preparation. Any suggestions for them?
Do the AMP program. Do a restart in your life. No, but jokes apart, my suggestion would be to try to reset your life by doing an educational program which enables you to look for new opportunities outside. Because if you do it on your own and you have to explain to people what you were doing for the last 6 months and you say you've just been doing UPSC, you'll probably shortchange yourself a bit. It'll be difficult to find a job. In a lot of my programs that I've done in the past, whether it's YIF, Vedika, and so on, people do this. They actually come to us after having been holed up trying to crack the UPSC when they're not able to, or they feel like they need to move on in life. They come, do a program, and then kind of resets your life. It starts your life again from now that you come, it's almost like you're on the same page as everybody else who's graduating from that program. That would be my advice.
I think Amit is back with a question. He wants to know, what are the rubrics by which HSoL judges people who to choose for AMP and who not to choose? There are some basics in place, which is essentially a graduate. You have to be a graduate. You have to have at least 1 year of work experience. Normally, we prefer that you have some work experience. Other than that, the application process is you have to fill an application. You have to go through a interview round where the director of academics or me, both of us and other team members also find out if you would be able to it's a rigorous program, whether you can keep up with the program, whether this is a program that will suit what you're looking for or what your ambition in life is at that moment. Anything else you'd like to add, Pramath?
No, this is my another one of my videos. Either you are interesting or you are interested. So we find you interesting and you're interested and you really want to do the program. We love that. That's what we're really looking for.
All right. So if there are no other questions, we can wrap up a little early because we all heard that Pramath Pont has a dinner to attend to. So we'll stop here. I think there is one that came up. All right, that's Amrit. Thank you so much. We have all the information about the AMP program. We're going to be starting on Saturday next week. If you are interested, you want more information, please reach out to us. Our information and everything was in the chat. And of course, you can visit our website. We look forward to talking to you, explaining, and see if you want to be a part of this program. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pramath. Have a good dinner and don't be an introvert and stay in your room. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Great questions today. Thank you for being such a great audience and enjoy your Saturday evening and the rest of the week.